WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for being with us today. We Should Know is on the air Tuesday, each and every Tuesday. Remember, our email address is weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. Kind of switching gears a little bit today. We're talking with Representative William Brisson. Representative Brisson, District 22, Bladen County, Sampson County. It kind of meanders around a little bit. I can't really explain exactly where the roads are. I'm sure you know where they are. I want to thank you for being with us today and taking time to come in and sit down and talk about some of the issues that's facing your district and the state.
Thank you, and it's certainly a privilege for me to be here and come and to give a chance to talk with the people. And I will say that it's been an honor for me to serve Sampson County and Bladen County, which is my home county, but we have so much in common with the two counties. We just match up well with our industries and our educational and our health care needs. So those are the things that I have focused on ever since I've been in the legislature. And
you've been there a few years now, and the interesting thing, I think, in talking about this is District 22, in covering both Bladen and Sampson, we got quite a large size viewing area with Star Communications down there on the cable TV side. And also with the radio side, we cover that as well. I want to kind of open the discussion today a little bit about not only what's going on in North Carolina generally, but the fact now that you're on a number of very key committees. One very important committee to the folks in this part of the state is a committee called Agriculture, and you're chairman on that committee.
That's right.
And that's a standing committee, and the Appropriations Committee, you're chairman on that committee. Appropriations and Health Services is another big issue that's affecting the state, and I'm just going to hit a few of these, but energy and public utilities, health, rules and calendar operations for the House. All of those are standing committees. Of course, the non-standing committees, you're on some of those as well. But I want to start with the agriculture piece.
Right.
Where are we, and how do you see us standing now with agriculture as a result of some of the horrific hurricanes that we've recently had, and there's been 2 or 3 to include Florence, the most recent. Ag took a pretty big hit in both Bladen and Sampson County. Would you say we're in the recovery stage? Is there still funding that is needed? How do we get out of this? And let's talk about the future a little bit.
Well, as far as and we were hit pretty hard in both counties with our agriculture products, and it is, we're still trying to accomplish and get where we need to be back to before the hurricanes and all the damages. There's been some movement. Of course, the big appropriations that we had for the agriculture that the state put into $240 million to go to farmers, and we started out with 38 counties, and now when all the reports came in, we're actually looking at 72 counties. So that kind of, puts a little different perspective on the money that was going. We're going to have to spend it within 72 counties now instead of the direct impacts, where the impacts were so hard. So that's put a little bit of difficulty and a little bit of time delay. Some of the checks have been mailed out in the last couple of weeks, and my understanding was it was just because of the counties that's been added. It's approximately 60% of what we were hoping to get out, to the individuals, and certainly hope that there is more coming. But with a second check, and we're just having to tally up and see how it goes through the first stages of it, and make sure that we have kind of met the needs of all 72 counties in some way, fashion, or form. And then still focus on the one with the direct impact. But it's a little bit slower process than we were hoping for, but I certainly think that we're not going to delay it any longer than it takes. I can tell you that. So hopefully the people will be a little patient with it, and hope there's more help coming for them.
I talked to some folks down in your area, the county and the Dublin area, and peanuts is a big deal everywhere, but
that's right.
particularly in Bladen County.
It is.
Do you sense that they got hit worse or about the same as other row crops, or is peanuts? Did they get a devastating blow? What's your feeling on that?
Well, it's in the peanut production was in more or less. Areas were hit harder than others, even in the counties, you know, because we had some dry months ahead, and then as far as the rains actually helped the peanut crops, and some of our growers done well, you know, in Bladen County. I'm not sure about the peanut growers in Sampson County because I hadn't talked with a lot of those, but as far as peanuts in Bladen County, it ended up being a pretty good crop. I mean, for them, it was not a disastrous crop, not as much as soybeans, cotton, and corn. And corn was still not as. Most of the farmers were beginning to get their corn out, and so that helped a lot. But then, you know, it's still something in the air that, you know, that we're hopefully to go back and make sure that the farmers are taken care of.
It's reported by the Agriculture Department that tobacco is still the #2 export crop, #2 crop in North Carolina. Most tobacco farmers tell me that harvest of tobacco, some of them say anywhere from 2/3 to some of them not 100% of that crop was hit. How does that affect, when I look at that and think about it, how does that affect the dynamic of taxes, of money that comes into the state? Obviously, farmers are business people. They generate dollars, part of that state tax dollars, which builds into revenue. But that's a pretty important piece when we look at trying to get that back up and stable again.
It is, and it's not as much as it was back when we had tobacco programs, you know, because every farm, you know, raised tobacco. Now we've got it narrowed down with the farmers that actually grow tobacco, and it does have some impact, but not as great as it would have been in the past. You know, that people were so dependent upon tobacco, but we've had to find other resources and other farm products that we could go to try to fill in that gap, because I don't ever see another crop replacing tobacco where it was as we knew it growing up in family farms, on the family farms. I don't see, it's going to be hard for the farmers to get a crop, and they're searching and seeking every day trying to get something, you know, to help fill in the gap where they don't have the tobacco anymore.
And to that point, one of the things, and we've had a couple of folks on from NC State to talk about this particular crop, but something that seems to be moving aggressively in the United States and also is taking a pretty strong foothold in North Carolina is something called cannabis, which we find we have hemp made from that.
That's
we
right.
also have cannabis now that's made from it, which is can be used in various forms. The regulation of that is one thing, but the Farm Bill kind of moved that forward a little bit.
Yeah.
Where does the legislature, and what's the conversation in the legislature about cannabis?
Well, we're certainly taking a hard look at it, but then it's not going to move very fast, and the farmers, we're not going to get in, the growers are not going to be, because the seed's not going to be available. And like you say, it's going to be so heavily regulated that it's going, you know, we got to make sure that the regulations are there, you know, for us to go by, the farmers to follow, and know what to expect from the crop, and, you know, the expectations through the new regulations and how they would react. And so that's, it looks like a promising future, but it's probably going to move a little slower than farmers were hoping that it would be.
To your point with tobacco, Dr. Tom Melton, North Carolina State University, was on, I think we had him on a few months back, but he talked about how interesting the idea of soil type was as it related to tobacco versus what the soil type that was needed for cannabis. And it seems that a lot of this soil in eastern North Carolina bodes very well for cannabis and could have a lot of potential for farmers.
Well, I think, you know, most in this area, you know, in my district, our soils fit just about any crop that we decide to move forward with or go with. But it's so I don't see that would be, you know, a hold up on it. But it's going to be hard to for folks. It won't be an easy road for them to move in to this cannabis crop because, like I said, I think the regulations is going to be, and tobacco is, from all the tobacco futures and the meetings that I've been in, tobacco's probably in more trouble than any other crop that's
even in a sense, just as a health concern as far as tobacco and nicotine?
Supply, demand.
Yeah.
I think the other countries, you know, and they have gotten over the period of years since we have cut it back so much, then the demand of flue-cured tobacco, the type that we've always known, and we always had the climate, the only climate in the world to grow that type with the aroma, the flavor, the nicotine that it produces, and those other countries have moved forward or producing at cheaper prices, I guess.
Absolutely.
And now it's hard to, it's just, everything doesn't look good with tobacco right now as far as holding its own where we're at and the futures of it.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Representative William Brisson, 22nd District, Sampson, Bladen County. We'll be back in a moment. Call a friend. Stay tuned. We Should Know is on the air.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We Should Know is on there. We've got an interesting show today, as hopefully all of our shows are, but we're talking with one of those folks that goes to Raleigh a lot, but lives in Bladen County. Farmer in the background in his business. He understands farming and agriculture. Big producer here in the state as it relates to agriculture. We know that fuels Raleigh. We know that fuels a lot of folks. Representative William Brisson, thank you for taking time to come in and sit down and talk to us. When we went to break, we were talking about agriculture. I want to kind of get back into that subject a little bit and kind of divert some of our conversation back to the hurricane issue. We keep seeing a lot of the hurricane issues, which historically we always thought about wind. Now we're seeing the big issue is flooding. I've asked this question to a number of folks, to include people with FEMA and Small Business Administration and others. What do we need to do as it relates to infrastructure to look at future problems that we're now facing with rivers or tributaries, floods in farms and those kinds of things, even where we build or don't build? Is there something going on? Are there committees looking at that in the preventative way? Because it appears these kinds of things are going to be, by a lot of scientists say, we're going to see a lot more of them. So what do we need to do to prepare ourselves and to prepare our agriculture community to try to help be ready for these things?
Well, one of the most important things, I think, is looking at our rivers and see if, you know, what input that comes in and make sure that we got the rivers can take care of the flow, and then make sure that all of our streams, in our small rivers, not only our big rivers, but our small rivers, our streams, our canals, our drainage. And I think we've, maybe got a little lax with those in the past few years, and we're going to make sure that we've got a lot of debris from the storms that are lodging up, and it doesn't show that much effect until we have the heavy rains. And when the heavy rains come, the flooding occurs, and we're just going to have to do a better job. We're going to have to clean up those creeks. We've got to clean up the rivers, get the move the debris in where the water flow can actually go in, and make sure not only that, but in our we get a lot of water from the highways, off of our highways now, and the water that comes off the highways is either standing on the highways or either, you know, it drains into our fields. We've been relaxed for quite a few years, too many years now, on the outlets of that water and getting the water off the roads, plus not turning them in the fields, but opening up the outlets that our road ditches are connected with, and make sure that the water flow will continue to get to the main streams. And so those are there, and it's sad, but it's affecting farming a lot now, and when it comes to the flooding, when we have the excessive rains.
It sounds like you've been talking to some of the farmers I have, and particularly as it relates to ditches and roads.
That's right.
And one of the comments I'm getting is that it's something you just don't see anymore. The Department of Transportation are not dealing with ditches anymore. Some of the farmers have gone in and, you know, out of their own revenue, tried to help clean those ditches. But if the state owns those ditches, and I'm just repeating what has been brought to my attention, would it not be correct to expect, or have some sense of expectation, that the state should also maintain those ditches as aquifers to carry those water aquifers out of there?
Anything that the state owns, then the state should be responsible for the clean, the snag and drag, or removing the materials. One of the main things that what the farmers are running up more against is, you know, is the outlets that I was telling you, you know, it's that they're not opening up for the water flow when it comes directly off the roads, and when that they used to keep cleaned up, which is still on the right-of-ways, and the state will tell the farmers and whoever calls in, you know, that we don't go, we're not allowed to go off of state property. And I'm not pushing for that, but I am pushing for them to open up those outlets,
right,
so that water will not stand there, either just rush out on the farmers, because that's where a lot of the problems are coming in.
So those ditches are on state property, is that correct?
The road ditches are, and the outlets where they connected in, everyone where they connected in was like on the farmland, which is private land and all, but if that outlet gets stopped up, then it just overflows. It doesn't get in the stream. You understand what where it can release and go to the main places to remove the water. So it starts ponding up, doing washouts, and that's where it's coming from.
Do you find that as folks in agriculture, farmers that we know, I mean, they're obviously bringing that information to you. If they go to a district engineer somewhere, I'm discovering they don't have the resources they used to have. A lot of what they've got, I'm told they're contracting out to private contractors, which may be good. But that oftentimes gets second tiered, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves, I don't know about your time clock, but it's going real fast, and we'll be back in hurricane season again, and we'll be having the same conversation. How do you move that ball forward faster?
Well, the first thing that, you know, looking at the farmer standpoint, the first thing that they're going to hear if they go to the local engineer, the county engineer with DOT, it's first thing they'll hear, we're not allowed to go off of state property, you know. But they don't get into back, because most of the farmers remember back in the days when they did open those outlets that I was talking about, keep them open. And that is where we've fell back on, and it seemed like when we went to mostly contracting, we're not doing as good a job with the contractors as we were when the state was maintaining. We were doing our own maintaining with our own personnel. And I'm not sure we've got rid of most of our state-owned equipment, but I still see a lot of yellow pickups, state trucks on the job with that's going on with the contractor. So I'm not sure how much savings we actually did on labor itself, because we still got a lot of employees that are there and on the job sites, but it's different when you're contracting work. And,
I'm often hit with the associated question with that as well, is the actual roads themselves, the roads that are major arteries to multi-million-dollar operations, livestock, poultry. You got them in Bladen County. We got them in the eastern part of the state heavily here. And those roads, apparently, from what I'm told, were never actually built to handle as many 18-wheelers that are going in and out. These are huge trucks that carry everything from food to exporting the animals and so forth. By saying that, that's not an excuse, because a lot of those trucks pay unbelievable taxes to the state. So is there a tension through the legislature, or what does a farmer do? And I'm asking this on behalf of the farmers. What do they do to bring attention to roads that are literally getting in pretty bad shape, that service their farm operations, and to the point that sometimes there's potholes that when I say potholes, I'm talking the pavement's beat out, and you know what I'm talking about because they're everywhere. Is there an expectation? Is there anybody looking at that? Is that something that the legislature gets involved in?
Yeah.
Help us understand that.
Well, hopefully there's, and I hope that we can address that and get some action out of it this session, because what's happening with our roads, and it's not because we're running the heavy trucks as much as it is in the wet weather, the water standing on the roads. And you remember when we were doing our own maintenance, the shoulders were always cut down where the water wouldn't stand on the roads. And if you'll notice now, particularly in the rural areas, but not only rural areas, but other areas, that the road shoulders are about 4 inches above the road, and that caused there's no drainage. The roads are not draining. The water staying on the road. The water staying on the road. The big trucks and the heavy trucks and vehicles on that road, it caused that bed that the pavement is on to get softer, and it's rutting out. It's rutting out, and that's then the potholes start. So it's a good example with us. They just built the new 4-lane highway just maybe in the last 10 years over in Bladen County down through, and they're back repaving right now, and simply because of that, with rutted and the water standing on the roads. But till we get that water back where it don't stand on the roads and we can get it off the shoulders, that's going to continue to happen. We'll always have a problem with the roads in wet. If it stays dry, we'll be good. But any kind of wet periods that we have, that's where the problems are.
It sounds like you're saying that we got to rethink how we're doing things.
That's right.
And we might have to come back and take some of those things that we did do that's been set aside and put them back into action again for sustainability.
Yeah. And the state has people in place. I mean, our county engineers, and we got the chief engineer in every county. That's what their job is supposed to be, you know, and keep those reports written up and try to get the maintenance off of it, because that's what they're getting paid for. We got people on the payroll that's responsible for that.
So is those questions?
And I'm not sure in where we're listening to them in Raleigh. I'm sure that the county engineers are well aware of it and what's going on. I'm not sure how much our head offices in Raleigh are listening to them.
So we should encourage people to keep bringing that information forward, and then they can process it from there.
That's right.
Okay. We're going to take another break, and we'll be back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Representative William Brisson, District 22, Duplin, Sampson County, about issues facing North Carolina, agriculture. We're going to talk about other issues from health. Several different issues that may impact your life. Call a friend, stay tuned. We'll be back in one moment.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that adds a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody try to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're talking with Representative William Brisson. That's Sampson and Bladen County. I think I mistakenly said Duplin a while ago. However, Representative Brisson has a lot of folks that support him in Duplin County as well. Particularly, I'm thinking about one of our General Assembly members, Mr. Dixon over there,
That's right.
Mr. Dixon. So, as we look at the agricultural piece, I want to kind of segue a little bit to some of the other things that's important that you are involved in now, and one of those is you share as a chairman of the Appropriations Committee with the House. Tell me a little bit about. It's almost like a window has opened up, and I'm referring back now to a News and Observer article, and some time back, back in 2017, you decided to switch to the Republican Party. That's a well-known fact, News and Observer, and you made some comments on that as it relates to how you see things in the relationship. But I want to kind of put that out there because now it seems that you have been in a position, or in a position now, that you've stepped into a broader view and a lot of heavy responsibility with appropriations and other committees that you might not have been on if you'd maintained your position on the Democrat side of the House. This is the question. The question is with appropriations. When you look at that and you think about what we've been talking about, agriculture, we even stick the other one in there, which is a big chunk of the budget, and that's education. You look at what our needs are in the state now. From your perspective, how is that budget balancing as you see revenue coming in? Are we going to be able to sustain, even maintain, should I say, the funding we've got based on the revenue coming in? Because the state of North Carolina is a mandatory budget balanced state. So help us understand that.
Well, in fact, this last week we got the new money reports out for this coming up budget, and it was before we actually got it in. There was a little bit of talk around, that it might be lower than it was. It might be lesser. Mm-hmm. But the money reports that we've been reported in is actually a plus for us, and so the state. Financially now, everything looks good, and I don't see any cuts or anything of those effect happening in this new budget. I don't know how much new money there'll be appropriated yet because we got to go through to make sure, everything balances out with the needs that are there. The most money, of course, education, number one. Our total budget, we spend over half of the budget in education, and the next largest is health and human services, health care. Mm-hmm. Those are the two big items, and they carry over 2/3 of the money of the total budget anyway. So so others, you still have to preserve enough, for the others to survive. But as far as education and health and human services, I don't see any cuts coming that with the programs that we've got now and today, and the reoccurring money that wasn't necessarily in the budget last year, and folks that they look at it and get concerned when we don't do reoccurring for the next year, but the money is always there. It's not that we don't have the money, we just not sure if the new programs that's been put in are working right, and if it's not working right, that gives us an opportunity in the short session to go back and reevaluate and change things out. But the money is always there in the budget. Mm-hmm. It's not like the money is not there. So hopefully, I know there's a lot of talk with Medicaid expansion. The governor, every time he gets a chance, he mentions that. a lot of interest in it, and it's those are things that probably going to be a big topic with the new budget. Education's still big, so there's some other demands that they want to meet. So those are the two. They'll be the two big leaders as far as our new spending or what occurs. But
when I look at education, one of the things that has been a conversation piece is the need for new facilities for public schools.
Yeah.
And the question is responsibility as to whether it's a state responsibility for those facilities. Is it a local responsibility for those facilities? Is there a need for a bond referendum if a new school building is needed? Is that a county responsibility, or is that bond referendum a state responsibility? Help us understand, as for the listeners and the folks that watch this show, what does those people need to do if they got a child in a school that's maybe built back in the 50s or 60s and now overcrowded, and they're having to spend lots of money on the building. I mean, a roof on a school now is $200,000 or $300,000. Then they have to replace the heating system that maybe is antiquated. The lighting system's antiquated. At what point in time do they look at state, does local government look at the state and say, hey, we got to have another school building here? Or is it their responsibility to figure out how to do that?
Well, one of the issues, the main issues today is the competition that's with public education. It's not like we've known it in the past with the charter schools, the private schools, 2 or 3 other schools that are coming in, and when the state dollars start following the students, that doesn't help the county, because the county is the only one. The public schools are the only one responsible, and the county comes responsible to furnish the buildings. But when the enrollment changes, and it has a big issue with rural areas.
Definitely.
And so the enrollment is lesser, so I don't know, it's going to be hard without some kind of mutual aid or the state getting involved, or a bond issue, or what. The counties just can't afford to go out and build new schools because our enrollment is continuing to drop in the public schools. So that's what we're up against, and I don't have a problem with charter schools or private schools, but I do have a problem. Everybody's not on the same page of rules. Until we get everybody on the same page of rules, then we got to be very conservative on putting money outside, taking the public schools' money and spending it in with the charter school and private. Okay? And that's what the big problem with education is today, and it's tough on rural counties. There's no way that we can go out and build new buildings because we don't know how much our enrollment drops every year, and so how do you keep expanding? And the counties, rural counties, don't have the revenues coming in to replace those schools.
And then folks will look at me. I mean, when I have this show, people will watch you and hear our comments, and somebody will pull me off and they'll say, well, then the obvious question is, how long can we afford to put it off without doing anything? And is there a point in time you literally draw that line in the sand and say, okay, we got to have something done by this date? And I think that's what people's looking for is where is there some sense that this is actually going to change, or do we, you and I were talking about before we got on air, that it seemed like time is going by so fast, and it is really. So people look at me and say, well, you talked about this 2 or 3 years ago. Why didn't we do something then? Or why don't we do something now preparing for the next 5 years?
Well, I think, and what the counties are facing, one of the biggest issues, of course the kids want new schools. But our schools that even that got age on them, the foundations of the schools, and we put new roofs on. I mean, we spent a lot of dollars on the upkeep. We pretty much kept them. I mean, it's not like they're falling in or whatever, but we could do a better job. I mean, if you lower the ceilings, re-insulate, remodeling is probably our only way for counties to continue to afford to keep the schools like they should be.
So you don't see any major bond referendum coming up on the state level to kind of shore up local rural county schools that are not, quote, considered one of the wealth counties in the state. You don't see any kind of major funding asset coming up in the next 5 years or so?
There is talk right now of a bill may appear, you know, and we may see it this coming up long session. But how much and what, you know, and how it's going to be, how the bond's going to be split up. But there's right much talk in the House, and I'm not sure about the Senate that much, but I know there's a lot of talk in the House, and I think the Speaker is pushing, you know, an educational, and that's what it's about, is another bond issue to, and most of it be spent on our county public schools. So.
Do you feel like Speaker Moore is a strong advocate of education from the seat you sit?
He certainly shows to be. I mean, he's, and you know, in the Senate, Senate just has some different ideas and different ways they want to spend, but it's, at the end of the day, we usually come together and it's, you know, try to do what's best. I know that the rural counties still have a lot of support, but it's tougher on rural representatives. I can tell you, because we, you know, just like my district, geographically is one of the largest in the state, and you know, you're trying to compete with these larger populated areas that may have 6 or 7 representatives in less area than I cover. So
Guilford,
that's what
Mecklenburg, Lake.
Mecklenburg, Lake, and so that's kind of what we're up against. And even though there's Democrats and Republicans, at the end of the day, I mean, the home folks gonna look after the home folk. And that's the way it goes.
Good point. We're going to take another break. We'll be back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Again, talking with Senator William Brisson, Sampson, and Bladen County. And we're talking about key issues that affect your life each and every day. Call a friend. Stay tuned. We'll be back in 1 moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us. Coming up on the last segment of the show today, each and every Tuesday at 2:30. The name of the show is We Should Know. We come to you on Star Communications, Channel 16, WCLN Radio, and there's a summation of the Sampson Weekly newspaper. We're talking with Representative William Brisson, and that is Sampson and Bladen County, or Bladen and Sampson County, depending on where you happen to be at that given time, correct? So, Representative Brisson, the thing that strikes me as we move forward with this, there's, again, so many different roles that you carry and things now that, should I say, briefcases you have at the legislature, and having visited that esteemed facility many a time, folks need to understand there's nothing up there that happens with the snap of a finger, is there?
No, that's exactly right. You know,
so I'll go ahead and make that observation to start with. One of the things that's happening in the state, however, is the couple of committees that you serve on and have served on for years and chaired one of those committees, looked at and continues to look at the whole behavioral health community in the state through organizations called managed care organizations, which fund providers in their regions to look after the health care, the behavioral health care needs of people. And a lot of folks that may not be aware of that, there's some changes occurring in that, and a lot of that deals with Medicaid funding and how these organizations are funded. Here's the core of the question. Where do you see that going? Do you see less managed care organizations? Do you see the same number? Obviously, there's a lot of folks plugging into this now, to include the County Commissioners Association and DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services. Mandy Cohen has obviously been leading the charge on this from the executive branch. Where do you see it from where you see it?
Well, being and representing a rural area and being involved with Health and Human Services ever since I've been up in the legislature, it's been, I know that rural areas, to provide health care is twice as hard to begin with in the rural areas as it is in the highly populated areas. But I don't see, we're down to 7 MCOs now, and particularly with the mental health side, which handles the drug part and all that works that. It's, I'm afraid if we get any lesser providers or MCOs, then it's going to be a direct impact on the rural areas. I don't want to see this thing turned into a corporate health care, because if it does, it'll be a big impact on rural areas for health care. I can assure you that, because even now in the higher populated areas, it's hard for a Medicaid patient to even get an appointment because of what the Medicaid actually pays versus other insurance companies, and so it's not something that people are out there trying to set up their business in health care to live off of, like most of the Medicare folks, Medicaid folks are still located in the rural areas. I can tell you that, and so I would hate to see it get any less, or maybe we might get down to 6, but 5 and 3, and I know they've talked, with the numbers 5 and 3, but it'd be very devastating to rural areas. I can tell you that.
Well, having been and grew up in and now represent 2 major rural areas, do you think that there's a lack of understanding of the rural area aspect from the level at DHHS with the Secretary's office as to how that works versus how it works in Durham or Raleigh or Charlotte or Greensboro?
Well, I think then it comes back to the politics of it, and it's so much easier when you're dealing with 25 out of one county representatives or senators versus 1 for 2 or 3 counties. So it makes a difference, and then it's going back to that population. I mean, the more populated areas, and they seem to get more attention than we do in the rural. Because I have, that's one reason I've been involved with Health and Human Services, because I knew, even serving 8 years on the county board and served on the hospital board in the county, in Bladen County, for 11 years, and it was just, I've made it one of my priorities to make sure that we continue to fight for the health care to be better in our rural areas. And I know if we don't stand up, then I don't look for a lot of support out of the larger populated areas.
You mentioned local hospitals and local hospital boards. My last review, I think there was around 6, maybe 7 local independent hospitals remaining in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Everything else had been consolidated with larger facilities, whether it's Wake Meds or Vidant or wherever it may be. For those hospitals it's trying to sustain, and you understand that because you served on the board 11 years, is there a future for local independent hospitals that are remaining in the state? Some of them we've seen closed in this state. Where do you think that's going, and what would you say to board members at these hospitals, having not only been a board member, but now being a person that's looked at it from the state level in the committee seat that you sat in, you've seen a lot of things. What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing I'd say that it's not going to get any, I don't see it getting any better for standing up and trying to hold on to the county hospitals, because there's very few counties now that operate. Sampson is one of the few that operates a county hospital. Bladen, even when I was on the board over there years ago, we went to critical access, and that kind of binds you to a, well, it does have stipulations in it and that you can't go, it's over 25 bed. And we got about 23 of total critical accesses and they're in the rural areas, and that's the only way they're surviving, where the government picks up most of the pay, you know,
Medicaid
because
fund.
there was no self-pay. I mean, you know, and it didn't take us long to realize that when I served on the board, and I was on the finance board too, and there just wasn't any self-pay. So we were actually better off just writing it off on charity, you know, and that way we could help balance our books out.
Right.
But just to try to collect those dollars, it's just about impossible. And
Is Bladen still holding its stance as an independent, or are they affiliated?
It's critical access, but it's associated now with Cape Fear Valley.
I was thinking so. Okay.
But it's still operating as a critical access hospital, but it's Cape Fear.
Do you think would it be reasonable when you're thinking about these folks that are, and of course, you know, I'm one that would support holding a local identity
That's
if
right.
it's critical access or whatever. But at some point in time, will that decision be made financially, or will it be made realistically by the people that try to support it? Because if you're just living off of Medicaid funds, they're not going to be able to maintain the facility.
No, it's kind of up to the individual board, the ones that still operating as a county hospital. It'll be, but the finances what'll force it to go one way or another. I mean, you know, and I'm going to support them as long as they're trying to hang on this county, you know. But I've been there and done that, and it's hard to find the answers, because I don't see it getting much better than, you know, for county-operated hospitals. It's kind of like the county schools, the same thing. The counties are coming in and getting in, you know, trying to fund new schools or anything else that they're trying to fund for public education. It's so those are. It doesn't look good for the future for them, but it'll be the finances that it won't be the boards. That won't be their main decision. We just want to throw up and quit or whatever. It'll be based on the finances and able to operate and provide the health care that the people need in this county.
And they'll have to recognize when that's happening. Hopefully get out in the right time. Or
That's
like
right.
you said, Bladen did become affiliated and
that's
as an urgent care kind of place.
And I'm certainly not, you know, not going to say, you know, I'm not trying to tell the county but I know that that's what they're facing, and I know that they'll continue to operate Sampson County as long as it's possible. But I'm just saying that it's not that they're just going to throw up their hands and quit. They're being forced to that direction, you know.
The big issue, of course, now, opioids, addiction issues in the state, national health care crisis. About 30 seconds left. What do we need to be doing in North Carolina? What are we doing? What are we not doing?
I think our sheriffs are doing a great job. I mean, you know, and we're trying to get them off the streets. We're trying to get where the doctors and all, you know, not getting the prescriptions out. We're trying to change that way of going, and we've done a lot of making progress with a lot of it, but still the courts is going to have to start helping us out. We cannot continue, the sheriff can't continue bringing, you know, in the addicts or whatever's going on, or the people that's out pushing it and not.
I want to thank you for being with us today. We're going to have to cut off there, running out of time. Invite you back anytime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you again next week on Channel 16, Star Communications, WCLN Radio. May God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.